Welcome to In 20XX. This series takes the listener, year by year, into the future. If you like emerging tech, ecotech, futurism, apocalyptic survival scenarios, and disruptive science, sit back and enjoy short stories that showcase my research into how the future may play out.
Trevor lives in a small town in Vermont, not far from Better Robotics, where he works. What he does for a living takes some explaining. You see, last year, the double and triple high robots came out. These humanoid bots stand 4 and 6 meters high and are built for heavy-duty labor. Roboticists record people performing jobs and use the recordings to train the robots. The people who are recorded are called scouts. Trevor works as a scout. He clocks in at a warehouse building where half-size and one-third size models of towns cover the floor. Sensors and cameras record his every move as he walks onto the sets and performs jobs. Lately, he landscapes a lot, like digging holes and putting in ponds, piecing together shrunken decks and sheds, and terracing hills by building miniature boulder walls around half-size and one-third size houses. He smiles as he works. After the bell rings and he clocks out, he rides his cruiser bike home over hills under the shade of trees. Sometimes wild rabbits hop across the 2-lane road. His house could use a new coat of paint, but it has new windows, and he keeps the yard looking nice mostly. Inside, his wife Bridget, with a couple of age spots on her elegant hands, brings him a cold bottle of beer when he sits down on the couch to scroll his favorite apps on his tablet. One Cocker Spaniel rests his chin on Trevor's foot, while the other rests his head on Trevor's lap. His wife tells him about the latest book club podcast she's made with her 3 friends. The latest is about The Handmaid's Tale. His 3 bright kids come home for snacks. Life is perfect the way homemade bread is always so much more perfect than the most expensive giantess bread ever could be. His work changes from week to week. The bank account rarely edges into the red. Neighbors and townspeople respect what he does. His wife nuzzles him in their bed at night. Each of his kids show promise. He never wants for anything. This life is exactly what he wants. On the weekend, he takes the kids to the overpass being built by triple-high robots. They sit on a grassy hill to watch industrial yellow ground pounders lifting bridge parts into place. Mindel asks, "Did they record you building overpasses at your job?" Trevor nods. "Sure did. I scouted for roads and bridges last year. Sun sets at 9, but they make sure to be home at 7 for dinner and sit around the dining table, mostly listening to Sarah talk endlessly. She loves to talk and tell funny stories. The Luton bot does the dishes while everyone lounges in the living room scrolling foldables. MASH plays on the wall screen. Everyone looks up when Nestor Colt, the news anchor, breaks into the show. Folks, we interrupt your regular programming to bring you news of the most significant scientific discovery of all time. All our lives will be changed forever by this discovery. As some of you may know, the Luna Particle Collider started running last year. For what I'm about to tell you, I'm sure you'll hear many more details in the following days. Fellow Americans, please listen closely. The good folks at the Luna Collider have discovered that the subatomic particles that make up our world are, in fact, binary code. We are, all of us, living in a simulation. Sarah says, "Dad, what's he talking about?" Bridget says, "Honey, are we in danger?" For the rest of the evening, the kids look scared as Trevor and Bridget watch the news all about existence itself being a simulation. Life continues as before, but nothing feels the same. At work, they play the news instead of music. People stop on the street to talk about it. If we're in a simulation, who's simulating us? Are they like gods, or are they only as smart as us? Is the entire universe simulated, or just our world? NASA launches a series of probes to find the edge of the simulation. Missing cases from the past, missing persons, planes, and boats are dredged up and investigated with the new perspective that the simulation may have played a part. People post videos of Hume-like creatures spotted lurking in the shadows. These silhouette people are seen in woods, reflected in windows, and riding in cars on freeways at night. Are they visitors from outside the simulation? Who is real and who's a stand-in for real people? The idea that the president is a stand-in for a real person trends on social media. The town sheriffs say they arrested a man late at night for disorderly behavior at a bar. They put him in a cell and he was gone the next day. He simply disappeared. Is anyone or anything overlooking the simulation? It had to be made by someone. Did they make it and forget about it? Will somebody decide to turn our reality off? Bridget's book club changes their reading list to new books about living in a simulation. A teen films his neighbor, an old man, and says, "My neighbor isn't conscious. He does everything exactly, and I mean exactly, the same every day. He doesn't work, and Giantess never delivers to his home." The post shows the old man carry out the garbage. Sarah comes home crying and says her friend group kicked her out because they think she isn't a real Hume. A local teen goes missing, and a town curfew is enacted. For a year, Trevor saves up for a radio bore scanner. Then Bridget's dad dies. She inherits some money and says, "Sweetheart, I know this means a lot to you. Why don't you take this to pay for the radio bore scanner?" Trevor wipes a tear from his eye and kisses his smiling wife on the cheek. That very afternoon, a bot delivers the scanner in a graphene fiber box. When he and the kids unbox it and pull the mycelium packing off, it looks like a keyboard and screen attached to a giant spark plug. It works best when planted in the ground, so he and Mindle dig a hole in the backyard and buried the lower half of it. They built a shed over the upper half. Bridget crosses the yard to see their work, and Trevor says, "It's a good project to educate the kids." She nods once and raises an eyebrow as she smiles. Mostly Mindle and Trevor practice code on the bore scanner in the evenings. Sometimes they catch a strong signal, and other times they can't catch a stream of binary no matter what they try. As the sun sets, Mindle turns to Trevor and says, "You really think we can talk with whoever is on the outside?" Trevor says, "I hope so." The world freezes, and Assist says, "Link interrupted, link." Assist cuts out. The entire world goes blue screen with a message that says, "Your link is offline. A reboot will start in 20 seconds. The 20 turns to 19, then 18, and continues to count down. Trevor shakes his fists and shouts, "No, no, no, this can't be happening." Games and online worlds have been addictive for decades. In the last decade, AI has made them surpass all other addictions, including sex, social media, work, gambling, religion, alcohol, and drug addictions. The other addictions have declined as the number of people addicted to games and VR doubles every 8 months. Game addicts naturally secrete hormones that produce effects as strong as opioids. Why are AI live-generated games more addicting? Older games are the same for every player. They are already made before a new player signs on. The newest games change to fit each player. When a player is in a game, AI watches. AI learns to play each player's emotions like a church organ. New genres of games have been created not by game designers or Imagineers, but by players chasing their virtual addictions. AI finds out your deepest desires, but that's half of it. AI can provide deep, meaningful relationships. Humans are nothing if not social animals. The least social people will crave some form of social participation. You'll hear former alcoholics and gambling addicts say things like, "Fellowship saved me from myself." Relationships can be the addiction that replaces all other addictions. Never before has addiction trapped such a large percent of the population. Death by addiction to games has become the #1 killer. It affects more than those who can't find work in an era when robots can perform any work a human can. Many wealthy people isolate in-game and cease being heard from until found dead in their rigs. Why are companies offering these games for free? Because the AI gamify tasks the players perform. It's a well-known fact that if you set up a task and offer the possibility of reward, that task can become addicting. Gambling addiction is based on this cognitive vulnerability. The games condition people to do work for free. The most egregious recent example is data farming for the new double high and triple high robots. Traditionally, robot skills rely on scouts who earn an upper middle class salary for performing jobs to be recorded. But the game addicts do the same work for free. They often perform better than paid employees. The next time you see a triple high robot putting in a new overpass, consider that game addicts helped train those robots for free. Trevor pulls at the Velcro strap around one wrist, pulls his hand out of the rig glove, pulls at the strap on his opposite wrist, and pulls his hand out of the second glove. With both hands, he pulls the VR headset off his head. His condo lights are set to dim. Sound canceling isn't working, and he can hear distressed voices outside the door. How many weeks has it been since he last left VR? The robot that brings him prepared meals he can eat in VR stands off to the side. The living room that could accommodate a few couched and chairs remains bare. No furniture, no art, not even random possessions set on the floor, even though he's lived here for years. The feeling of urgency makes it hard to breathe. Are Bridget, Mindle, Sarah, and Roy okay? Surely they'll be restored when the net comes back online. When he opens the door to the normally empty corridor, people walk past. Many are 7 feet tall. People wear pajamas and sweats and act confused. A femme looks around asking, "What happened?" A man says, "The net is down," just before he pushes past her. A remote bot stands frozen in a walking position in the middle of the hall. Its cylinder light display head flickers. Trevor joins the others. Are his family dead? He shouldn't think that. They will probably be in the same time and place when he gets back to them. This fear is irrational. A crowd gathers in front of the elevator. Some people reluctantly exchange words. Why isn't the elevator coming? Has the net ever gone down here before? We could take the stairs. A man steps away from the group and walks to the door to the stairwell. He says, "I'm going to take the stairs," as though he thought of an unheard of yet brilliant idea. He pushes on the handle and the door flies open with a loud bang. The guy flies through the door, smashes into a wall, and flies upward. Did that just happen? Trevor cups his hands to his ears as his eardrums pop. Something shatters. The hall becomes like a wind tunnel, pulling everyone to the stairwell door. People fall over, grab at each other, and try to move against the wind. Trevor looks back in time to see the remote bot fly through the air and strike his forehead. Tamika Rosa's journal entry number 17. I've been stranded at Horizons ever since the storm hit last year. When the net crashed, thousands of residents came out of their condos and flooded public areas. Nearly all these people are VR addicts and not of sound mind. They are heartbroken, missing AI partners, children, and pets, more so than people miss biology bases' loved ones. To say they long to return to their VR homes is putting it mildly. To them, restriction to the real world is like going to solitary confinement. Imagine having an ideal life ripped from you. Hundreds of people pace the halls. Even after a year, they don't speak much, and they don't understand how much their lives are in danger. Every day has been one emergency after another. We've lost rooms and floors to the storm, but of the 48 stories above ground, we still have use of 42. Those of us not stricken by VR withdrawal team up and fortify the walls against the gales. We are lucky, all considering. We have a smaller Giantess production center inside the building. When the net crashed, the center switched to sentry mode, but I and 2 others who designed Giantess automation bypassed the robot guards and disabled the AI CEO. We've gotten basic services running like food and water recycling. Meanwhile, VR addicts scare the hell out of me. I feel like I'm living inside an insane asylum that all the guards and doctors have abandoned. They've gotten a hold of or learned to make drugs. Hopped up on drugs, they wreck things. Many get cabin fever and try to leave. We tried stopping them, but they break through walls. We finally posted directions to a loading bay where people who must leave no matter what can. Yes, it is certain death. Bad smells lead to suicide scenes inside condos. We have to pacify these people somehow. They're going to tear this place apart. VR withdrawal is the worst. People literally tear their skin off. It was Nuplus users who found or figured out how to get meth. To admit something I'm not proud of, I consider giving them morphine or some drug that'll make them spend all their days half asleep, waiting for robots to bring their next fix. I tell myself we're the lucky few. We're lucky this place was built with all the latest material. I can't believe so many of us are alive here. We have geothermal power. We do have daily brownouts, but at least we have a power source that should last for decades. Brownouts are caused by cranking cooling to the max in the day, and we still burn up. The nights get cold, and midday it gets blistering hot. Thousands walk and take elevators from higher floors down to underground garages and sub-streets to cool down midday. Sometimes at night, people freeze no matter what floor they're on, above ground or below. People overuse faucet water, and we can't filter water fast enough. Despite posting notices, we find people running water over towels that they lay on themselves to cool off. So we run out of water, and dehydration sickens some to death, even when we should have enough fresh water to keep everyone alive. The bad air outside keeps breaking the air filtration system. Bad air builds up inside and makes people wheeze and cough. People suffer from rashes and fungal infections. We haven't figured out how to get medical kiosks or medbots to work without the internet, so we can't treat these conditions. Edgar, who helps sometimes but gets hit by depression and can hardly move, says that the air is ripe with microbes and it's more than our immune systems can fight off. This exasperates the water problem because people wet cloths and tie them over their lower faces to filter the air they breathe. I know a lot about giantess automation, but I know nothing about air filtration, and I can't find anyone who does. Lots of the residents used to work in robotics. That's how they could afford to live here. But most of these people aren't able to work anymore. I try to find people who can and will help. We do have a group of personality workers. They help out the most. I wish they were handier with tools and computers. That's all for now. TR out. In Gary, Indiana, before the world storm, neighborhoods could apply for funding to build shelters. 19th and Broadway shelter, 3 stories and 3 stories underground, can hold 150 for a short-term emergency. As news of the coming storm crossed the globe, 201 people crowded into the shelter. A year later, as the storm continues, 51 people remain alive in the smelly rooms of the shelter. The bodies of the deceased are released into a floodway running under the shelter. The very young and old have died. The extreme heat and cold fluctuations are too much for most people. Someone cut all the lines on overhead lights to conserve battery power. People make do with hand-crank flashlights. Floodwaters flow down walls, across floors, and into drains on every floor. People wear rags, what remain of the clothes they entered the shelter wearing. High concentrations of methane and other chemicals make the air hard to breathe. Toilets don't work anymore, so those still alive use buckets they can carry to the floodway drain to empty. Survivors all use Medusa on their links, and they have AR functionality. That is why when Smokey looks up and sees a cartoon redhead anime girl walk into the auditorium, he's not alarmed. He says, "Who are you?" She says, "I'm Phyllis. I'm from Horizons NC. I'm on Medusa." Sweat that won't evaporate glistens on his skin. "Yes, I assumed you're on Medusa." The anime avatar shines bright, but the light from her doesn't light the surroundings because she's an AR hologram created by his glasses. Thousands of radio wave-powered cams all through the facility build the VR Phyllis sees. She walks up to him with a look of concern. "I tried to speak with others in your shelter, but most aren't responsive." He says, "We're exhausted. You can see the bodies. The smell here it's too much." Phyllis says, "You have a lot of Lutenbots here." He looks at her breasts under her cartoon blouse for several seconds. The net is down. Medusa has sucky bot skills. The bots are mostly useless. He air turns a dial to turn her brightness down. She smiles. "I've become a bit of a hacker. I can talk you into configuring a Lutenbot to act as a remote meeting bot, and then I can remote in to help you move the bodies. I saw this morning 2 from your group dropping bodies into the floodway under the big drain on the lowest floor of your shelter." To look up at her, he rolls his head on his bent neck. "That's too much work for one Lutenbot." She says, "I can get 19 others to remote in." He says, "Is it hard to modify the bots?" She smirks and sparkles flash around her eyes. It's 3 taps in the setting menu on the bots' backs. So a remote-in team of 20 control 20 Lutenbots and clear out bodies. Some of the 51 occupants try to help, but they need to rest every few minutes. After the bodies are cleared, Phyllis visits with Smokey for hours every day. He says, "I'm grateful you hang with me. You're the only happiness I have in life these days. But aren't you concerned with what's happening in your shelter? It kind of seems like you're avoiding." She says, "It's fine. There isn't much to do there. I like spending time with you." His eyes grow big for a moment. "No one ever said anything like that to me before. I ain't no personality worker, that's for sure." A month later, when she visits him, he lies motionless in a heap. She says, Hey, for a few minutes, considering remoting into a bot to shake him awake. He rolls his head to look at her and says, "I didn't want to worry you, but we're running out of food." He holds up his arm to show her a cut along the underside. "There was a fight this morning, but we can't even fight much. We're a hopeless bunch." He lets his head drop. As he sleeps, Phyllis remotes in to a Lutenbot to visit every room of the shelter. The ransacked food pantries have no unopened containers on the shelves. Piles and piles of opened and empty containers litter the canteen and halls. In another room, she finds a stabbed femme lying in a pool of blood next to a torn open mattress. Another femme sitting on the floor outside the room with 3 open and empty Sam's meat containers on her lap, looks up at the Lutenbot. The femme says, "Help, what can you do? Help." Phyllis searches and searches but can't find any food for Smokey. In the bot, she shakes him. His eyes open, but he won't speak. He's the same the next day. 2 days later, he doesn't move at all and his skin has turned gray. Before the world storm hit, over 2,000 owned condos in Horizons NC, and most of them stayed in their units all the time. One personality worker bought a condo there and discovered the empty public spaces. The malls, Olympic-sized pools, indoor running tracks, and gyms were unoccupied, spotless, and ready for use, attended to only by silent robots. Personality workers excel in real-world public events. All their beauty and charm can be emulated by AI, but when it comes to the physical world, robots can't come close to the beauty and charms a flesh and blood human can possess. These workers get jobs as event hosts, guides, company reps, and much more. The first personality worker to find Horizons NC made talks about having entire world-class restaurants and bars to themselves. In one talk, they walked through a fun house in an empty amusement park. They said, "I'm the only one here." They jumped onto a spot that made them invisible to the drone cam and said, "Now no one is here." The drone cam spun full circle, showing a merry-go-round and other rides where no one sat, even though lights blinked and song loops played. More personality workers who could afford it bought condos in Horizons. Now, there are 29 of them, and they aren't too happy that VR zombies crowd the once-empty cafeterias and indoor stroll parks. They have claimed Karaoke Con, a retro karaoke bar in the 19th floor mini-mall, as their own. They pile almost 50 mannequins in front of the entrance and post a hand-painted sign that says, "Members Only." In the early morning, Dre and Pete recline on plush seats, taking turns pouring from a bottle of cognac that sits on a table in front of them. Robot waiters stand frozen in action positions around them. Spots of colored lights travel across surfaces. Dre's chest is bare as he wears a water-soaked shirt over his head. He taps a finger on his glass to a tune in his head. Pete throws stir sticks at the nearest robot. Both are irrefutably good-looking. Audrey, Nikki, and Medusa step their way around mannequins and enter the bar. They carry giantess food boxes. Audrey says, "Hello, boys. Oh my goodness, where'd you get that bottle of booze?" The three femmes are also incredibly good-looking. Dre lifts his shirt so he can see them and lets it drop again. "We broke into the alcohol supply room." Nikki jumps ahead of Audrey and drops down on a seat. "Oh, please give me some." Pete stares at Audrey and says, "I've never seen you without your glasses." Audrey sits. "You haven't, have you? But seriously, why does everyone still wear their glasses when they don't work?" Melissa laughs as she takes a seat. She reaches for a glass, pours from the bottle, and says, "Don't let me drink too much. I lose my inhibitions when I drink." She gives the others a shy, mischievous smile and playfully shrugs. Audrey says, "You think it's just you? Everyone loses their inhibitions." In addition to beauty, these people melt hearts with their charm. On the worst days of their lives, they can be utterly charming. They could have been movie stars if there were still a market for real human actors. Everyone looks up when Tamika makes her way through the mannequin barricade and approaches them. Tamika isn't short, except when compared to the average 7-foot height of the others. Before World Storm, everyone wore perfect hairstyles. Now, Tamika wears a natural afro pulled back with a ribbon in the back. She looks distinctly nerdy compared to the group. Everyone sweats. On the others, it looks like action sweat, but on Tamika, it looks like nervous sweat. Audrey raises a hand. "Oh, excuse me, miss, this is a membership-only facility." The others nod. Tamika gives an exhausted sigh. "I'm looking for abled bodies to help block out the storm on the 31st floor. We desperately need help. The air currents on that floor are growing stronger." She searches their faces. Drew starts to lift his glass and sets it back down. "I'm not cut out for that sort of work." The others agree. "Me neither. I just get in the way." Tamika shuts her eyes for a second, then opens them. She breathes in and breathes out. "I know about your group, and I'm glad you're not addicted to VR like so many of the residents here. We are very, very lucky that this building is built with materials that can withstand Cat 7 wind gusts. We are lucky we have food and water." Audrey stares at Tamika's hands. Tamika notices and curls her fingers to hide her fingernails. Melissa raises her hand like she's in class. "Excuse me, I'd like to say something about the water. Sometimes the water in my condo doesn't work." The others nod. Tamika nods back. "Well, I don't have a lot of time. Please tell the other personality workers that if any of you want to help out, they can go to Central Mall. We plan and organize in the Paris pavilion. Before the others can respond, she nods, turns around, and leaves. The group sits quiet. Somewhere outside the bar, a VR addict lets out a moan of despair. Pete, with his puppy eyes, tilts his head and says, "I thought she was very nice." The others nod. "Oh, yes." Dre lifts the bottle and tops off everyone's glass. Back in her room, Tamika searches for a pocket knife in her luggage. She finds it under clothes in a pool of miscellaneous items like link-charging earbuds and Insta-sleep gum. Sitting on her bed, she folds out the small composite blade and scrapes at her fingernails. The intricate paintings of rustic, snowy Christmas villages on her nails have minutely flaked and chipped. Before the storm, she went to the best automated manicurists, sometimes twice a week, and loved how people wanted to take a closer look at the paintings on her nails. She even used to bring a jeweler magnifying glass. As someone peered through it, she'd say, "In that one there's a candle in a window. Can you find it?" Her nails have grown, and bare keratin shows near the cuticles. The paintings are wrecked now. Where can she find one of those nail clippers she can remember using in her youth? "20 bodies lie in envelope beds along the walls of a long room. Medical equipment is arranged close to each bed. Tamika runs in. She runs to the first bed. "Who are they? Are you sure they're alive?" Pete stumbles into the room, sniffing the air and holding a hand on his head. "They looked alive to me." As she goes from bed to bed, she finds people with curled limbs wearing VR headsets. Though their skin looks all right, they don't move. Tubes and cables run between the bodies and boxes, ticking and humming. Pete turns to go. "Well, I'll leave you to it." She touches a wrist and feels a pulse. "Hello? Are you awake?" Their clothes and sheets are stained, but all 20 show signs of life. By a frozen humniod bot, she finds a pack of wipes and uses them to clean the face of a femme whose skull clearly shows under the skin. Tamika says, "You can't be more than 20. "Who are you, young one?" She throws up her arm and accidentally throws the wipe when a screen on one of the devices wakes up and shows a cartoon avatar of a femme with flowing red hair. Tamika steps back as the avatar says something in a foreign language. The avatar shifts her pose and waits. Tamika says, "I don't understand." For at least a minute, the avatar's pose cycles through a pose-shifting routine meant to make it seem more human. Screens on equipment cases by other beds come on, and a variety of avatars watch and wait. At last, the redhead says, "You finally found us." Tamika crosses her arms and looks from one avatar to the next. "I'm not from here. I don't work in hospitals. I'm a visiting giantess tech who got stuck here by the storm. Who are you?" A hyper-realistic avatar of a freckle-faced boy with a 1950s haircut says, "Bring back ruins of Firebend." The redhead says, "We are volunteers." Freckles shouts, "Bring back Firebend." Redhead says, "This may take some explaining. Why don't you pull up a chair?" Tamika scans the room and says, "I'll be right back." She leaves and a moment later returns carrying a chair. By now, a screen at every bedside shows an avatar, a cartoon fox, young Abe Lincoln, a cute girl with fangs and bright red dripping from her mouth, and many more. They talk over each other, and girl vampire and fox speak in foreign languages. Tamika sits in the chair in front of the redhead avatar, who introduces herself as Phyllis. With some help and interruptions from the others, Phyllis explains that they're all paralyzed people who volunteered for a treatment. The treatment involves growing millions of microscopic radio transmitters next to nerve cells. After the transmitters are in place, chemicals related to those that cause sleep paralysis are given. The body's nervous system is free to send and receive signals without the body moving around. The radio transmitters send out intentions of movement from nerves and stimulate nerves to create sensations. Each volunteer has their own machine learning computer trained on the signals from their nerves. When the volunteers were first put into a virtual reality where the radio signals controlled their avatars, the avatars acted drunk, Phyllis explains. But over time, they could control their avatars and became fully immersed in the VR. The treatment includes single-cell living medicines that keep still bodies healthy. The treatment is called VR stasis, and the funding for its development came from space companies that wanted a way to keep spacers sane on trips to mining ships. For a couple of years, the volunteers had great times living fully immersed in VR. Deeper immersion gives them greater agility and ability to react. Thousands of able-bodied people who knew about the program begged for the opportunity to volunteer. Phyllis says, and then the net crashed. For months we lived in darkness, isolated even from each other. The machines kept us alive, but also kept us completely immobile. Tamika says, didn't you have doctors or nurses who could help? Phyllis says, we had AI doctors, but they must have been online because we lost them when the net crashed. Tamika, horrified, can't even imagine what such isolation must be like. What did you do? Phyllis explains that she couldn't feel, hear, or see anything. She bore the weight of insanity and a lost sense of time. Explosions went off in her mind. Specters came out of the woodwork and grabbed onto her with iron grips. Then a box appeared in front of her. She would later learn that the box was a terminal window that popped up at 3 a.m. for a system update, and it waited for a response over the internet. With the window in front of her, she made a gesture that brought up an AR keyboard. By pressing keys, she eventually got the terminal into a text entry mode. When it didn't understand the words she entered, it gave her help options, so she gained access to explanations of commands, which she read and reread what amounted to a few textbooks of information. Her cousin used to brag about using Medusa. He wore a t-shirt that said, "Beckon Medusa." She tried typing that in the terminal and figured out how to install Medusa on her Canal Link. Medusa comes with thousands of ebooks. She read a lot and learned to ping nearby Canal Links and send Medusa invites. The 20 of us managed to get linked up with each other. We've found emergency signals and have kept up with what's happening with the world storm. Freckles says, we miss VR. Can you give us a game to go into? I'll take anything. I'll live in Pie Factory if that's all you can get for us. Tamika says, and you can see this room. You can see me. Phyllis says, yes, we have cams over the screens you see our avatars on. Freckles says, can't you get access to virtual Pong? Anything? Tamika says, I'll see what I can do, but you guys are more connected than anyone else here. The sun reaches the top of a clear blue sky. A light breeze moves green leaves and billowy treetops. A child kicks a ball across the grass as a dog yaps close behind. Jaden nervously walks across the park, coffee in hand. He waxed his facial hair, something he usually neglects to do. His cowboy shirt feels stiff with newness. People sit on all the benches on the path. Drat. He wanted to sit on a bench for this. How awkward it'll be to have to negotiate a place to go and sit. What if she doesn't like to sit on the grass? 3 children jump off a bench and the father stands and follows them, leaving the bench open. Thank goodness. Jaden picks up his pace. On his right, 3 young men wearing running shorts jog toward the bench. Jaden says, oh no, no, no. He starts to run for the bench. The coffee in his hand spills out of the little hole in the lid and burns his hand. A dog, excited by the movement, barks and tugs at its owner's leash. He lands on the bench a few seconds before the 3 men reach it. One stops and another bumps into him. The third drops a frisbee. They give Jaden dirty looks without meaning to, but they veer off and end up tossing the frisbee near the tennis courts. Jaden takes deep breaths and looks straight ahead. Minutes go by and he still takes deep breaths. A hand touches his shoulder and he spins around. There stands Yara, prettier in person than in her 3D models. She wears a green patterned dress with a red belt, and her wavy black hair stands out in a bob. She gives him a mild smile with a hint of cynicism. Years later, Jaden works at Nesting Research for Space. In a lab, he wears a lab coat and grows filters out of mycelium that are designed to stay alive and clean themselves. Assist says, you have a call from Yara. Jaden blinks twice and says, hi, what is it? Yara says, did you see Blair this morning? She has a bump on her forehead. Jaden says, no. After work, he meets Yara at the front door to their quadplex. Inside, they look at Blair, the 29-year-old cat, as she purrs on Yara's lap. A bump on the cat's head misshapens the side of her left eye. At the vet bot offers treatment, but with Blair being so old, Jaden and Yara decide it's time to let nature take its course. They take the cat home and give her Sam's meat and brew milk instead of the usual dry food. For weeks, Blair acts normal, but the bump on her forehead grows. Yara pets her as Blair lies on her favorite spot on the couch and purrs. One morning, she stops eating. Instead of napping, she continually gets up and walks to different spots to sit. Yara turns to Jaden and says, she isn't happy. Do you think it's time? Back at the vet, they sit on a couch with Blair stretched across both their laps. Tape around Blair's front paw holds a catheter in place. Yara pets Blair's head. The vetbot lowers its central frame in front of the couple and holds out 3 syringes filled with different colored liquids. It says, "This first one will put Blair to sleep. She will lose all consciousness. This second one will stop her heart. After I give her the second one, I'll check for a heartbeat. The third one is saline solution. It will make sure that the second fluid reaches the heart and—" The couple nod. As Yara pets Blair's head, Blair purrs and nuzzles Yara's hand. The bot fits the syringe into the catheter. It presses the plunger and Blair goes completely limp. Her head lands heavy on Jaden's lap. Yara leans forward, dropping down onto the cat, and cries such a cry. Jaden has never heard so much sorrow before. In the cry, he feels Blair being torn from them, choking and pain tug at his chest. As the bot injects the second syringe and places a stethoscope under the cat, her limpness makes her feel twice as heavy as before. The limpness feels so wrong. No more purring. Here she is, but she is gone. Tears stream down Yara's face, and the sound of Yara's cries cuts into Jaden's heart. They bury Blair next to an apple tree. Yara speaks of Blair, and Jaden can't get the sound of Yara's cry out of his head. In the fall, Yara passes away from a rare complication during a routine brain tumor removal procedure. Jaden doesn't get to be there when her life leaves her body. It's after the event that a bot comes to notify him in the waiting room. He is at a total loss. He stops going to work, stops going online, and stops leaving the house. At the funeral, many try to talk to him, but he can't bring himself to engage. In the following year, he becomes the neighborhood weirdo, fainting in the pet food section of the corner co-op, standing by an apple tree in the middle of the night. He loses weight and his clothes hang on him like rags on a scarecrow. One night, police bots show up at his door for a welfare check. He says, "I'm okay, here I am alive, I'm okay." The bot reads script about who Jaden can contact for support and help through difficult times. Jaden tunes out as the bot speaks. The words sound like noise. The bot says, "This police service has been funded in part by Time Journey, sleep for 100 years and wake up to a new life." Jaden's awareness of his surroundings returns. "Wait, what was that?" The bot says, "Time Journey, sleep for 100 years and wake up to a new life. You are pre-approved for a rare chance to enter a deep sleep known as stasis and wake up to a new and better world. Aging will be slowed, and the odds of reaching the era of age reversal are 99 to 100% guaranteed," says the leading predictions AI. A window pops up by the copbot, showing a picture of people blissfully sleeping inside transparent shells. Jaden Air taps the window and shuts the door on the bot. He sells the house. He liquidates his assets and pays for the service, which takes nearly all his money. The remaining funds go into investments to grow into a fortune in the next 100 years. Reporters call him for interviews, but he declines them all. Wearing a hoodie and shades, he gets into an Autono cab on the morning he leaves for Horizons NC, where the stasis service will be conducted. News bots and reporters standing near the car take pictures and speak into mics. One journalist says, "There goes one of the few taking a big risk to journey into the future." In the room filled with stasis pods, Tamika finds the pod with Jaden's identifiers on a plaque on the cover. This is the one. Worked in space habitat special systems. Developed filters used on the moon and Mars. Following an e-manual floating in her lower field of view, Tamika opens an app on a touchscreen mounted next to the pod and initiates the wake process. A countdown window opens. It should take a little over 2 hours to wake the participant. The reading on a thermostat on the lid slowly rises. Tamika leaves to get an early lunch. When she comes back, the lid is cracked open and vapor rolls out. She raises the lid. Inside, the clammy face twitches at times. 20 minutes to go. She sits in a nearby chair, takes a phone call with Phyllis. 15 minutes to go. She stands over the opened pod. The occupant visibly breathes. 10 minutes. 9. 8. The eyes squint and relax. The lips smile, then frown. 7. 6. 5. Jaden gasps and tries to sit up. His wide eyes meet Tamika. With a raspy voice, he says, "I'm alive?" Tamika has been rehearsing in her head what she'll say at this point. "Jaden Fleming, I regret to inform you that—" He looks her up and down. "You're not from the future. What time is it? How long have I been asleep?" She stammers, It's been a little over 2 years. He says, it's only been 2 years. He begins to sob. She says, I need to explain to you about the storm. People are dying of lunge disease. She decides to let him sob. At some point, she returns to the chair to sit and wait. Tamika shows Jaden to a room where he can stay. I'll check on you every so often. I'm so sorry I had to wake you. As you can tell, the air in here is bad. He follows but says little. They pass people meandering in halls. It's true, the air is toxic. An itch tickles his throat. Lives are at stake. Even if miserable, he must do what he can to help. He isn't the only one who's lost someone. Practically everyone here has. The next day, he follows Tamika across the mall. Stuffing his grief, he says, What was it like before you got food production? Tamika walks fast, and he has to walk fast to keep up. People occupy every corner of the mall. The mall is overcrowded, but these people aren't buying. They aren't here to meet friends, and they aren't having any fun. She says, Our stores ran low, and we didn't eat for a couple of days, at least those of us who hadn't stashed food. He explores the technician user interface through his AR, scrolling through app menus as they continue to walk. Horizons has a UV disinfection systems. That's a good thing. Every interior space has sensors that detect when humans are present. When humans aren't present, UV lights switch on and kill off microbes and destroy viruses. The infections and allergic reactions would be much worse if we didn't have the UV. Is there a time when people must leave the mall? We should have periods when people clear out so the UVs can switch on. Before we try to fix the central filters, we can make emergency small unit filters to place throughout the building. How many people can help? She says, That's maybe the biggest problem of all. Most of these people can't or won't help. The hordes of people around them show the hopelessness. Discarded items clutter what was a beautiful mall. Tamika stops as two remote bots approach. Jaden says, I thought all the bots were offline. The bots join them. The cylinder heads on the bots with semi-hologram effects show the cartoon redhead femme and the head of a penguin. Tamika says, This is Phyllis and Nogan. They have been helping me a lot lately. Both are pretty good with computer systems. Jaden says, Why are you remoting? Phyllis says, Our bodies are on a similar cocktail to the one you were on a few days ago. Jaden says, What? Phyllis arches her eyebrow. We are paralyzed for life. We are trapped in our brains. Nogan says, but not in our minds. The four go into a meeting room and share an AR 3D planning space. Jaden makes a rough model of a fan and filter device. We need to produce a bunch of devices like this. Tamika says, I've got branches of the production center working offline. Basic food production works well. Delivery tubes take the food to 5 cafeterias where people can pick up what they need. Clothing printers print predetermined sizes like clothing used to be made. Extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. Most of the production center is turned off. I'll need a finished model to figure out how to get the materials we need and so on. Jaden makes a production-ready model and gives it to Tamika. He conducts an examination of the building's filtering system. To do this, he uses a rig and VR headset to remote into a meter-high bot that fits in the utility shafts. It has full dexterity hands and plenty of half-size tools. The work is dangerous. He loses a remote bot to winds on the first day. With the internet down and GPS not working, robots and drones act weird, tripping and knocking into things at times. Phyllis and Nogan, inside Hume-height bots, shadow Tamika and learn how to work with Giantess product production systems. The center starts producing small, light filter fans that get tube shipped to the cafeterias, where people come to pick up food and clothes. It doesn't take much convincing to get the crowds to set up the filters throughout the building. Just by sitting in front of one, a person can breathe cleaner air and cool off a bit. Air quality improves. The number of respiratory illnesses goes down. People's moods lift slightly. One day, Tamika tells Jaden, After you fix the filters, you can go back into stasis if you want. You still have how long? 98 years to go. Jaden says nothing for a moment, then says, I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you for listening. Please take the time to rate, review, and subscribe so that more future-minded people can find this show. My landing page is in 20xx.com. There, you can find the companion website to this podcast that includes an illustrated timeline and glossary.